One. Well, hey, Dave Melinda here, Positive Polarity Podcast. Hope things are going awesome for you this week. I got a great question for you, and this one may catch you by surprise, okay? But my question is, have you ever considered writing a book? And I get people ask me about my journey writing my book, and I love to explain my journey. But I hear a lot of things like, oh my gosh, I don't know where to start. I don't think I have the time. I hear people like, oh my gosh, I'm totally confused about the process. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to get somebody that's an expert on this. So I'm honored to be hanging out with Nancy Erickson. How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks, Dave.
Awesome. You're an international book coach and you're a publisher. So fill us in. There's all these weird words of publishers and authors and writers. There's all these weird words, self-publish, all that. So I want to start at the beginning for you. Tell me what it is that you do for somebody listening right now that might be thinking, hey, maybe I should write a book.
Yeah. So I typically work with high net worth individuals, and we give you a real hands-on white glove service to write, edit, publish, market, and distribute your book worldwide. And, we've got 20 years of experience doing this international because I have clients all over the world. So
Sure.
that qualifies. Um,
Yep.
but most of the people, like you said, they really have a story that they want to tell, but they have no idea how to get it out and get it, out into the world where that message can do its work.
Sure. And I'm guessing too, Nancy, people are like, what do I have to add to the thing? I remembered when I wrote my book and it went to Amazon #1 bestseller in 3 different categories. My first call was to my mom and dad when they were alive. I'm like, all right, you guys, which one of you bought like a whole warehouse full of books, right? And it was like, they're like, I didn't buy it. What are you talking about? Right. So there's kind of this self-doubt that's there. I don't know if that's with everybody, but it sure was with me. So do you help people kind of with that head trash if
Yeah,
that's like
absolutely.
stopping them?
Yeah, and it happens along the way in the process because we work with a lot of highly accomplished people, yet they're very timid in this area because they've
No.
never done it before, right? And they're having a lot of imposter syndrome. And what people don't realize is that you've only had one life and you've done what you've done, but you may not realize how unusual or how helpful that
Sure.
can be to others until you get an outside perspective. So, yeah. And then there's at one point that I insist that our clients start telling people that they're writing a book. And that's really hard for most
Yeah.
people. And
Right.
so I said, well, you don't want to just you know, throw it at them when it's finished. Let them be
Yeah.
part of the process. Let them, and you won't believe the support you'll get. And especially if you have any kind of a following. Most of my clients kind of live on LinkedIn as their only
Sure.
social media.
Yep.
And when they start talking about writing their book, then people are saying, well, what are you writing about? And then kind of doing some posts, maybe some vulnerability posts about writing and stuff. You know what you're doing when you do that is you're building your audience so
Sure.
that when you're finished, you have people who are already invested in what you're doing and are willing to invest their dollars to buy your book.
Sure. Wow, that's so cool. I got a ton of questions. Before we jump in, though, I want to ask you because you started like in that IBM Oracle world, you were in corporate America.
Right.
And we have a ton of people listening right now that are in that spot and they kind of have this secret identity that they want to be like you and I, where we own our own businesses. Um,
Careful
so
what
I
you
love
wish
to.
for.
Exactly, right? People are like, "Man, Dave, you can set your own hours, you can work when you want." I'm like, "Okay, there's
And you
two
can starve.
misnomers right there."
And you can
There's
starve too. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. There's two misnomers because when the customer calls, you better be there to answer the phone,
Always.
right?
Always.
Um, but so you were in corporate, and so kind of fill us in on what your journey looked like moving
Yeah,
into
so I
being
had
a
about
business owner.
35 years in high tech, and I'm going to jump back to childhood. All I ever wanted to do was be a writer. I love to write. I love to read. I just constantly enveloped in books. And so so of course it makes logical sense that when I graduated college, I accepted a job with IBM to be a systems engineer. Big
Wow.
disconnect there, right? So, I did fine, I could do the job. I didn't love it. And then you know, later in my career, I worked for Oracle as an application sales manager. And I got to tell you what, I hated it. I hated every minute. The only thing I didn't hate was the multiple six figures I was making. But everything else, I would wake up in the mornings and I would just like, you got these quotas and they're like many millions of dollars. And I just didn't like it. I wasn't suited for that, but I was trapped by the salary and the commissions. And it was multiple six figures. And so I guess I thought I was just gonna live my life in misery and keep going on that way, but something happened. And I usually find that change is usually created in one of two ways. You either kind of have an aha moment or something comes upon you. More
Sure.
often it's the latter. And so
Yep.
what happened to me in my life was that my dad was diagnosed with a terminal brain tumor, and we knew he would only live 7 months. And so my mom needed a lot of help. So I went down and, kind of tag team with my mom and my youngest daughter. She had graduated early from school and had a 6-month wait till she went into medical school. But so the three of us kind of tag teamed until, he passed away. And then when I came home, I was like, it was kind of like, oh my gosh, I don't have a job. And then it was like, oh my gosh, I don't have a job. Yeah. And I thought, I can do anything I want now. And I had kids early. I was 45 and my kids were out of college. They were just
Okay.
a year apart,
Sure.
but yeah. So I didn't have the financial pressures of putting kids through Pepperdine, and
Sure.
so
Yep.
it was like, you know what? I've been kind of under this thing the whole time and I haven't liked any of it. And now I have a chance to be me. And so I went back to school and I got a master's degree, a master's of fine arts in writing. And then the University in St. Louis, where I got my degree, they asked me to join the faculty, which is kind of happens sometimes when you're an older student, and you
Sure.
do well. And at the same time, I started a publishing house, Stonebrook Publishing. And I want to talk about that for a minute because you talked about terms being thrown around, Dave. We are not a self-publisher. We are a regular, it's called a hybrid publishing house. And we have won many, many awards, but it is not self-publishing. And that's really important to my clients that
Sure.
when that they know, we're not going to have some sloppy self-published book kind of thing. So we're a professional publishing house. So I started this publishing house, and the first book that we published, you kind of have to walk into your future. So what
Mm-hmm.
was my first step? I just decided I wanted to go back to school for a little bit. And
Sure.
then it turned into something else, teaching, and I want to do mainly it's nonfiction. I want to do this. And so I thought, okay, well, I don't like the hurdles that people have to get through to get a big name publisher and going through an agent. I said, I want to make it more accessible to authors. And so I started this, publishing house for nonfiction. The first book we published was written by a Holocaust survivor who had gone to school with Anne Frank. And we did their book release at their school in Amsterdam. And I was like, this is kind of cool,
Sure.
And then the
Wow.
next book
That's
that I
awesome.
published, the second book we published, we got back cover endorsements from Sir Paul McCartney and Cindy
Mm.
Crawford. And I was like, we're clearly doing this right and all.
Sure.
But there
Yeah.
was a problem. The problem was this. We were getting a lot of manuscripts that had a seed of the mission for our publishing house, which was to publish works that would either save lives, change lives, or transform society. And they had a seed of that in it, but they were so poorly written, we couldn't do anything with them. We couldn't edit our
Sure.
way through these works. So I took a step back for about a year and I wrote a step by tiny step by tiny step by tiny step process so that people who aren't authors who aren't professional writers could become authors of outstanding published books. And so that's how we got started with having, I call it the whole shebang,
Sure.
start with us, you end with us. You start with your idea. We work you all the way through the planning, writing, editing, publishing, marketing, and
Sure.
distribution world.
Wow. Well, and you bring up a great point, and I want to get clarification for people listening in for myself. You're kind of, I sense like writer and author. I don't think those are the same. Or do you use those words interchangeably, or do you feel
Not
like
really.
there's a difference between those?
No, I don't use them the same because writers write a lot of things. They write text messages, yeah, and they write blog posts, and they write, I don't know, social media things. But an author, it's different because you have a central message and you have to carry the reader through everything with your writing, with your skills, and with what you learn how to express yourself. So being an author is much different than being a writer. You'll find people who, for jobs for writers, they're maybe in a marketing department or something like that. But the thing is that you don't have to know how to do that when you come and work with us, because
Sure.
we hold your hand and take you through the whole process.
That's awesome. Well, and you talk about creating a lasting legacy, and I have to say, my parents have both passed away in the last couple of years, and now we're searching through their stuff as we get a chance. And now you like really hold on to a note that he wrote or she wrote, right? Or something like
Right?
that. Boy, I think this book thing, I mean, I kind of, for my book, I feel like hopefully someday my grandboys will at least appreciate that, be able to think about their, grandfather that way.
Show you through
When,
it. A different
yeah,
side.
when I'm just curious on the lasting legacy side, like what is that to you? What does that look like for Stonebrook? I mean, what do you kind of share with people if that topic comes up?
Well, let me talk about what we don't do, and then I'll work my way back to that question.
Yeah,
We don't ever write, we don't publish any books that are just like all about me, all about me. I did this and I did this, and nobody
sure.
cares.
Yeah,
I can't stand it, and I'll refer you to somebody else if that's what you want.
fair.
We carry our clients forward to write meaningful works. And
Hmm.
so if a lot of older people want to leave a legacy. They may have made their fortune, sold their business, and they're kind of like, I'm not really leaving much of me behind, And so they start thinking about, what are the things and the values that are important to me that I want to pass on to future generations? I'm working with one client now that it's kind of funny. The basic the basic tenet of his book is that if you're a young person and you want to succeed at work, here's what you need to do: show up and do your job, you know.
Yeah,
And I thought, that's right, and then he talks, about other things about how you can really stand out as an outstanding employee, so that you can
sure.
either advance there or advance in your, through your career path and in your life. So but a lot of people, that the intent of their book isn't to leave a legacy, but they have a message inside of them that they have a, a real burning desire to communicate. And the legacy part of it is kind of a byproduct of having
Sure.
done.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, and I totally that makes sense. I just think it's really special to be able to have your words in a form where generations can learn from your mistakes, your experience, your wisdom. So, and I like that you're focusing on the nonfiction piece, so that are they generally considered business books that you guys
There's
are
a lot
working
of
with?
business books, but you know what, Dave? Another real strong category is what I call the overcomer books. People who have been through things, they've seen things, they've done things, they've overcome something, whether it's economically or physically, or a health issue or whatever, and they want to And when they were in that spot, they couldn't find any help, the kind of help they were looking for. So they're writing their book for the people who were maybe are in that same situation, and they can kind of
Sure.
just reach back and give them a helping hand.
Yeah. Well, and the other piece that you talked about, which I want to unpack with you, is you talked about ways to elevate your status.
Mhm.
So what are, how does, so for someone listening, they're interested in growth, they're interested in upward movement, whatever that looks like. How does the book process, how does that book path help those types of people to be able to elevate that status?
Yeah, well, but your book should do three things for you. It should establish you as an expert in your field. It should increase your credibility and help you to attract a following. But it's only going to do those things if it's well done. And I have a lot of people give me their books, that self-published books, and I don't have anything against self-publishing except that I haven't seen a lot of good product come out of that.
Sure, sure.
And they don't know that. I mean, the cover is like some boilerplate thing, and they didn't get it. They didn't get a proofreader, and there's errors in it, and that happens a lot. And
Yeah,
so, in that single, gifting a book to somebody, you've trashed your credibility. You haven't elevated it. You've shown that I'm not really that good. And
sure,
so, and the thing, I don't, elevate your status. I don't, I'm not at all into the narcissistic approach.
sure.
And,
Yep.
nobody likes that. But here's the thing. If you don't put yourself out there, nobody's going to know about you, and you can't make any difference for anybody. And so what's hard for people like you, Dave, and me is we have to constantly be promoting ourselves. And that's
Mhm.
one of the things that, as being a small business owner, you have to do. And it's not comfortable, but you can do it in a way that you're not promoting you, but you're giving good advice. You're giving, challenges for people to consider and that kind of thing. But
Sure.
if, the book will do that, for the fact that you have been professionally published by a
Mhm,
publisher will do a
mhm.
lot for you. Now, a lot of my clients want to step into the speaking arena and have paid speaking engagements.
Yeah,
You can't do that if you don't have a book. It's an
yeah.
option that's closed to you unless you have a book. But if you send them a book and it's not good, you're going to be, won't be invited either. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think about the progression for myself, or for anybody listening, and you can kind of see where you stopped or where you're in the process of. A lot of people have written blogs.
yep.
Um, some people have written articles for magazines and gotten those published, right? Maybe some white papers. I mean, there's kind of this natural progression. And I did all those, and people are like, oh, okay, cool. But then when you say I wrote a book and it's an Amazon #1 bestseller or whatever, it's like, oh my gosh, that's a totally different scenario, even though it's kind of just the summation, it's the culmination, I should say, of that journey. And do
Well,
you
it may look
normally
like
see?
that, but it may look
Yeah,
like that, but it's a supreme accomplishment.
yeah,
It is not easy to write a book. It's not like
right,
writing a blog. It's not like
right.
writing an article or a newsletter. It's totally different. So it deserves a different amount, it commands a different amount of respect.
Well, and I was curious, do you see that? Do a lot of your authors start with simple things and work their way up? Is that kind of a path to writing a book if you wanted?
No, it's extremely unusual for my clients.
Okay.
They just come in cold and they like, "Look, I want to write this book and I don't want to know what to do." And I'm like, no problem. We'll start here. And then we do this and then we do this. And then, and it just, they grow into it.
Wow,
And these are
that's
people who've
crazy.
only written emails for 30 years, so
Yeah. Well, and again, whatever status you want to get to, I don't look at it as, in your words, a narcissistic thing. I think that there's a corporate ladder,
right.
if
Yeah.
you're not growing your business, it's probably projecting backwards. So, growth is a pretty normal thing for most businesses, and this may or may not be the natural progression. Um, How do you
Well, it's
deal
also,
with the?
I was gonna say something else though,
Yeah,
Dave. It's also a great way to attract business to you.
sure.
And a lot of our clients will be like, well, if I can get 3 new clients from this, it pays for the whole production of it. And so
Right.
it really gives you a different level of credibility. And like I've worked with some financial planners, and so they always give their book away to prospective clients, et cetera, and
Sure.
stuff.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
other people use it as a magnet to draw business to them.
And I think, I mean, whether it's a business choice, whether it's a personal satisfaction thing, I mean, I don't think there's a wrong reason to write a book. Is there at
No,
all, Nancy?
absolutely not. No, there's not. It doesn't matter if you just want to do it because you just have it. If it's like checking off running a marathon to you, that's fine.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
But what
Yeah.
I'm saying is that we're going to make it meaningful.
Wow, cool. Well, hey, we're going to take a quick break, and when we get back, I want to kind of walk through the process of what that looks like, where to start. I want to help people understand what that journey is. So we'll be right back. Welcome back. I'm honored to be hanging out with international book coach Nancy Erickson, and we're talking about if you've ever considered writing a book. At one point, she said it is hard because it is hard, but then there's this ease to it if you find, the right publisher and the right book coach. So I want to start with, like, where do you start? For somebody that's interested right now listening, they may not have a topic, they may not have any goals. I mean, where do you start to try
Yeah,
to define this?
that's perfect because you don't have to know yet what you want to do because the process really pulls it out of you. And so we always start off with a series of foundational questions. And they're things like, why are you even doing this? What's your motivation? Um, um, who are you trying to influence? Who's your audience? And we want to get really specific about that because we want to know what kind of change you want to create in the audience. And so there's about 12 of these questions.
Okay.
And once you answer them, we distill those answers down into a single sentence that
Hmm.
is the purpose statement of your book. And this is what helps you crystallize your message, right? And it's like the purpose of this book is to do this particular thing for this specific audience, period. Because one of the challenges when people are thinking about writing a book is they have all this stuff swirling around in their head and they don't know, what do I put in? What do I leave out? And so when we have that purpose statement, we then measure everything that you're thinking about putting in your book by that. And if it doesn't lead the audience to realize the purpose of the book, we just set it aside. You may write more books, you never know, but your book needs to be extremely focused on what point or what action you're trying to encourage in the reader. So that's where we start. And then I developed this process that I call book mapping. And that's where we create a visual mind map for every chapter in your book. And we plot out the entire book before you ever start writing. And the value of that, there's a lot of value of that because it gets things set in your mind. But also then when you start to write, there's no excuse for writer's block. I mean, writer's block is just fiddling around, not knowing what you're going to do, but you're
Sure.
going to know if you're in execution mode. And the way that we plan those chapters is a way that makes it so much easier for you to write and really simple for the readers to follow. So we do it like this. We say, we develop your chapters in problem solution sets where you name the problems that your audience is having that you can address. And then through a very story-driven methodology, you present your solutions. So you keep them reading and reading because you're telling stories all the time. And we get all of that for every chapter totally mapped out before you start writing.
Wow. That book mapping, is that where a lot of the time is invested in the process then, in this book
Not
mapping
really.
piece?
Believe it or not, we have like 6 sessions that we do that in. And
Okay.
And it really flows. And once you get into it, I haven't had anybody that has stumbled much in that area. The part that really takes more time is actually writing, because
Right.
writing takes time. And I always laugh at this quote by Mark Twain where he said, I would have written you a shorter letter, but I ran out of time. I mean, and you get better as you go along. But at first
Sure.
it's clunky at first, but you get into a rhythm, and you learn to find your voice as an author. You want to sound like you. And we plan out a writing calendar mutually, and I keep you accountable. You owe me a chapter this day and that. So
Sure.
we just kind of build it as we go along.
So where would I've heard the term ghostwriter. Where would something like that come into this, or would it apply at all?
Um, I have a great aversion for ghostwriters,
Okay.
and let me tell you why. Your book, a lot of people think they want a ghostwriter because they want to save time. It is not going to save you time. You're going to spend so much freaking time with that ghostwriter, and they're going to write something and it's not going to be quite right. And then you're going to get kind of teed off because you talked about this at an interview and they didn't get it right. So you got to keep going back and back and back. And
Gotcha.
I think that people think it's a time saver, or that they don't have the capability of doing it. But I think you're going to spend about as much time just doing it yourself. But here's the real thing that gets me. I can always tell when I'm reading a ghostwritten book because they're just skimming the surface. They're not going, the book is only as good as the interview questions that the ghostwriter asked you. And they don't probe beneath the surface. So in our books with our writers, we really encourage the writers to be transparent with themselves, to talk about their successes and failures and lessons and all coming, because we're just human. We do stuff,
Sure.
and when it's appropriate to put that in the book. But the ghostwriters don't seem to probe. They'll tell the story, but I like a story that has a lot of undercurrents, and a lot of like loose ends that kind of get tied up at the end. And that's what
Okay.
we work on. But I don't think you're going to spend less time with a ghostwriter, and I know you're going to spend a lot more money.
Well, because that's probably one of the excuses is I don't have time. Where would I possibly fit this time in? I'm running a full-time business. I have kids. I'm coach. I'm this, I'm that. There's all these roles that we put on ourselves, right? How do you, what would you respond? I mean, it is a time investment. So
It is. It's a
what's the
time.
thought process?
That is a really valid question. When I was kind of designing all this, I had that in mind because I was a busy business owner, and I knew that nobody quits their job to write a book,
Right?
But
Yep.
you have to carve out the time, and it's a major project for 1 year. And you won't be able to take on any other major projects during that year. But then it's
Gotcha.
over, and you're like, okay, so I kind of equate it to going back to school. So I went back to school in my 50s,
Okay.
in my 40s. And I thought it was like, you get about halfway through, you're like, why am I doing this? This is so dumb. And I was like, so you just gut it out. Do you remember your senior year in college? You're like, oh, I can hardly stand this. It's that way with your book at the end, but then
Sure.
you're
Gotcha.
over and you have the degree. And never
Sure.
once have I thought about a homework assignment in college or in graduate school, since then. But
Yeah.
we chunk it in a way that
Right.
really busy professionals can get it done. And so
Gotcha.
we work very closely with you to establish a writing and publishing calendar that
Sure.
fits your
Is it
capacity.
Yeah, is it more on your schedule or on mine, or how does that work for somebody that's busy?
What do you mean, yours or
Well, I
mine?
mean, like, am I committed to every week at 5 o'clock I'm meeting with you, or does if
No,
I,
no, no, no.
what is the, I mean, because I'm thinking about this, and let's say we have this purpose statement we talked about, and then we
Yeah.
mapped it out and we start writing. Well, the fear that I would have and did have was spelling, sentence
Oh, yeah,
structure.
No, no, no.
punctuation, all
Okay.
that? Is
I'm
this
so
making
glad you
sense
said
to
that.
the person listening, you know?
I don't care at all about that. You know why? Because I fix it.
Okay,
And so the schedule, as you asked about, I worked with you to figure out what will work with you. When can you send me a chapter? And it usually it ends up being about every 3 or 4 weeks is
okay,
a chapter. And so
gotcha,
you would write your chapter, you would send it to me, and while you're writing the next chapter, I'm editing the first
gotcha,
chapter. And
okay,
so I don't want you to, I mean, I want you to use as proper grammar and spelling and all as you can, but it will be fixed. And at the end, when all the chapters are written, I go back and do a really precise edit to tie all the loose ends together and weave these
okay,
things through it and stuff. So
gotcha. Because I
none,
would think
not,
that would be a panic spot for a lot of
yeah.
people, you know,
Well, you know what's
what's that
amazing,
gonna look like?
Dave, is that when they get that first chapter that's edited back from me, they
Yeah.
see, oh, this is how you do it. And they start
Mhm.
doing it that way. So they get better and better and better and better and faster as we go along.
That's cool. So once then the writing happens, so we're in this cadence now where I'm sending you a chapter and then you're sending me a chapter and we're kind of clipping along. Am I responsible for all the content? Or do you help with content, or how do you approach the content part?
Well, we've mapped it out on your book maps, and then you're responsible to write it. And I'm not sure what you mean. I don't add things to your book. I don't add, we edit it. It's your work.
Okay, gotcha.
However, I will make suggestions all along the way. Like, have you thought about throwing this in there and that? That's part of what you get back from me.
Sure.
But yeah, people don't usually need me to add content to their book.
Right, and I just didn't know, I mean, you know, if research, it goes into, because a lot of research goes into finding the right, if it's a business book, the right statistic, the right,
Yeah.
I mean, I know when
Usually
I
the
wrote,
author does that because they know what they want and they've already got it in their head. So
sure,
it's really
gotcha.
pretty easy to look up.
Cool. So then as we're landing that, and we're starting now to get to the end of the book, and then let's say I give you my last chapter, you review it. So now we have, I don't know, was that called a manuscript? I mean, I don't know what you call it, but so we have this rough, you finalize it, we're ready to now go to print with this, right? Is
We're
that
not ready to
kind of
go
the
to
next
print.
step?
We're
Okay.
ready to start the publishing process.
Gotcha.
And this
Okay.
is where having a professional publishing house um, is really a differentiator. So I'll tell you what our process is at Stonebrook. Okay, we have the finished manuscript. The first thing we do in terms of publishing it, well, two simultaneously things. Number one, we design the book cover, and we usually give you 3 or 4 original book cover options. You
Okay.
pick the one you like the best, and then we tweak it until it's exactly what you want.
Okay.
Simultaneously to that, your book goes through our proofreading department, and it's read by 3 different proofreaders. These people are reading for grammar, punctuation, word choice, all those kinds of things.
Okay.
And so then at the end, there's a proofread manuscript that you have to approve. And then we don't make changes after that because then it goes to layout, right?
Sure.
There's always a
Okay.
little changes. But our layout department is totally different design department from the cover design. But they will take elements of that book cover and carry it through to the interior layout of your book so that your pages are really consistent with your book cover. I don't know if you've ever noticed the inside of books, but take a look at them. They're different. They're all different from one another. And it's a pretty precise process. So after we have the cover and the layout, then we will produce proof copies of the book. And that'll be one for you. And I always read everything that goes out, all the proof copies. And what we're looking for, we're not going to make changes to the text. We're looking for errors. And
Right.
there are always a few little things in there. I will find more than the author does because I notice things like odd spacing or placement of a, of a pull quote or something like that. But
Sure. Sure.
I'm looking with different eyes, not just like what are mistakes, but what are ways that we can really tighten this up.
Sure.
So, and then
Okay.
after, we'll make whatever changes that we found that needed to be made. And then then we release your book for distribution. And the distribution piece is really important. It's worldwide. We distribute through Ingram Publisher Services. They are the
Okay.
largest book distributor in the world. And
Sure.
automatically your book's going to appear on Amazon and barnesandnoble.com. It will also be distributed to bookstores, libraries, universities, and they have the option to order your book and other booksellers around the world. It's really fun because we don't ever know who's going to pick up your book. We can't know. But
Sure.
sometimes I'll Google the name of one of our authors' books and it's like in Australia and in New Zealand. And you see them all over the world. And I'm like,
Sure.
yay,
Yeah.
that's so cool.
That's cool.
But the book distribution part is really important because you want to have that international visibility.
Sure. Okay.
And then our final step, and this is really important, you don't think about this, but we're thinking about this for you. The final step is our legal team will register the copyright in your name with the US Library of Congress. And if you don't register, your book is automatically copyrighted, but unless you register that copyright, you can't protect your intellectual property.
Gotcha.
So that's our final
Sure.
step. Yeah.
Wow. Well, and that sounds daunting. I mean, from that purpose statement to the legal team, that's
Well, you're not
like you said.
responsible anything for you only write the thing with my help. And I hold your hand the whole way. All that
Yeah,
we have a big staff that does the
I
rest of
heard that before. I've heard that before, Nancy. You just write the thing.
I'm gonna hold your hand the whole way.
Well, and that's the cool part about it is a daunting process. It sounds like because you've done it so many times before, you have been able to obviously make it easier along the way. I was curious, do you get involved at all in audiobooks? Is that
Oh yeah,
something that,
absolutely. And that's part of
okay,
our package when we produce your book. We do, and this is our complete, white glove service packages. We do a hardcover, softcover, ebook, and audiobook. But
okay,
we partner with an audiobook company and they have voice actors that perform your book.
sure.
You do not want to do your own audiobook. You can't, don't just, it costs a lot of money, studio time, and you're just not going to be very good. Just stick to your day job and let us get this done for you.
Oh my gosh, that's funny. So yeah, well, I was curious like about the hardcover versus softcover. You mentioned that you provide both. Are there advantages of one over the other? Are there places for one or the other? Or why do you do both? I'm just curious.
We do that because I think our clients enjoy having a higher quality book in addition to the soft cover.
Gotcha.
And hardcover books are in my opinion, they're an acquired taste. I don't like to read them because I think they're hard to hold, but unless they're a slimline kind of a book,
Mhm.
and those are
Sure.
nice. But there is an elevated ambiance about them, right? But they're
Mhm.
also more expensive to produce. So you won't make as much on the hardcover sales as you will on the soft cover.
Gotcha. Okay. And I was
And the other
curious,
thing
so
is
then,
a
yeah,
lot of people like to, if they are using their books to attract clients and stuff, they might like to have a hardcover version to give clients and they just keep the
sure.
soft cover on Amazon,
Yeah,
whatever.
no, that's great idea. Do you print as well, or do you contract that out with somebody like Amazon, or who prints how
Yeah,
does the print part work for you?
Amazon, Ingram, who is our distributor, provides a print on demand service. And I want to talk about print on demand. What that means is your book is not printed until it's sold. So here's the way that works. Amazon gets a Amazon Prime order for your book. They do an EDI transaction to Ingram. Ingram prints and ships it. So the beauty of this, okay, and what the way it used to be, I would say 15 years ago, before we had digital printing, you had to print a run of books starting at like 2,500
Yeah.
or 5,000, and you got them in your garage, in your basement, in your guest room, and all that
Right.
kind of.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now the books aren't printed till they're sold, so you don't have any inventory carrying costs.
Okay. Gotcha. Perfect. And that was going to be my question because I've seen some people where they, order a bunch of them, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of copies. We order ours in 100 at a time unless we're going to an event where you need more, but
Right,
it
right.
just it's so much easier than having to worry about a warehouse full of books
So
somewhere.
that's so much to manage, and that's not your
Yeah.
regular job. But the other thing that's really cool about it, Dave, is that when you order books for yourself, let's say you're going to order 300 because you're going to be speaking at a conference. The only thing you only pay the print fee for the book plus shipping to get them
Yeah.
to you. So your
Right.
book might be retailing for $22.95 and the print fee might be $5. So when
Sure.
you get to your event, you're selling them for list price, right? So your margins are greater.
Sure, absolutely. No, that's a great point. And I was just curious as we start to land the plane today, Nancy. I know it's a question that probably always comes up is how do you look from a cost perspective if somebody's listening right now and they're excited about this? I don't know if there's like parameters that you tell people that the average book costs X, or if you just stay away from that based on how, the process is going to go. I was just curious if you have any
Are you
ideas for the
asking me
listener.
how do you recoup your investment?
Well, that and also what is your investment? And again, like you just said, if I'm going to make 17, this is the people listening. If I'm going to make $17 a book and it costs 17,000, I gotta sell 17,000 books or whatever the numbers are. I'm not good at math.
But we always
But
have that discussion beforehand. I want to know what
sure,
your
okay,
goals are for your book,
gotcha.
right?
Okay.
And you normally, it's funny. I'm working with a client on his third book, and he goes, "Yeah, my branding person told me that." She said, "You know what sells your first book?" And I go, "What?" And he goes, "It's my third book." And they go back and read the other ones, which there's some truth in that. But
Yeah.
most of our clients are justifying the cost on the opportunities that it will afford them if they
Right.
want to be a speaker, if they are trying to gain more clients, and they do an analysis. You have to be smart about your money, do an
Yeah.
analysis on how much this investment is and how many new clients do I need to get in order for that to be a break even, or then I can start making money on it. And
Sure.
as I said, I work with high net worth clients. So a lot of them, one guy told me that if he got one client, it would pay for the fee for like 3 times over. So
Sure. Yep.
yeah. And they,
Well, yep.
and I don't want, and people also need to be wise about what is required on your part when the book is finished in order to get it in the hands of people, because it's an ongoing process. To remember what I said earlier about putting yourself out there. If you're a entrepreneur, you got to kind of keep putting your same thing with your book. People have to
Yeah.
know about it in order to want to purchase it. But the best way that I have found for people to justify the expense is the opportunities that it could bring to them.
Yeah. And I'm guessing most people, if they're purely trying to make money on the book, it's going to be really hard to recoup that cost unless you're marketing the thing like crazy. And it's
Even if you
crazy to
are,
me how many,
there's
yeah,
no magic formula for book marketing. We do not know what, if everybody knew what made something go viral, we'd be doing it all the time, right? But we don't know. We don't know
yeah,
what that is.
yeah,
And so it's an
yeah,
effort. There's an effort behind it after the book is finished.
sure, absolutely. Well, one of the highlights of my book writing career was showing up on a cruise ship somewhere and in the library was my book. So,
Oh my
that's,
gosh, that's so
yeah,
cool.
that's kind of a cool thing,
Did
and
your
so you
wife
just,
put it there?
I don't know, you know what?
Oh,
Hey, the less I know, the better here. Come on, Nancy. I don't want to answer. I don't want to dig too
teasing you
deep.
because I'm teasing because at one time I put my book I just left it on the shelf in an airport bookstore. And it's like, oh, my book's in the airport.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, exactly. Well, cool. Well, one last thing. What would your tip of the day be for somebody that's considering writing a book or considering this concept? What would your tip be? Maybe it's something we covered, maybe it's something that we haven't shared yet.
I would just think about who would you be writing to and what would be the reason for writing the book? Because you write to communicate something and you have to know who you're talking to. And it's also
Yeah.
really good to define your audience very narrowly so that you can find those people when you're finished.
Wow, cool. So know why you're writing it and know who you're writing it to. And I
Exactly.
think you do that, I think it's you're way farther ahead, just again from experience, you're way farther ahead because along that journey, there's plenty of times like, why did I do this? You
Yeah.
know, and like you mentioned, that imposter syndrome kicks in and you're like, What the heck am I doing this for?" That's awesome. So well, this has been great, Nancy. Thank you so much. If somebody
Thank
does
you.
want to connect with you, if they have questions about the process,
Yeah.
if they're have just questions about anything we talked about or something we didn't, what's the best way for people to get a hold of you?
Yeah, I think if you go to my website, thebookprofessor.com, there's a
Okay,
link at the top to schedule a strategy session with me. So you just click on that and fill out all the details.
awesome. Thebookprofessor.com,
The
all
book,
one word.
T-H-E, bookprofessor.com.
Cool. Thebookprofessor.com, all one word, and schedule some time with Nancy. This has been awesome. Thank you so much. I learned
Dave.
a lot and appreciate that you're giving back. You're kind of like taking the back seat while somebody takes the front seat. So that isn't
Yeah, I
always
always
easy
want to
to
be in
do.
the
So
background.
yeah, yeah, exactly. That's awesome. Well, thank you. You have any books planned for your future?
Oh, you know what? Right now, I don't because I'm editing so many right now, but I've written a couple and I'm kind of satisfied with that for now.
Awesome. Well, thank you for everything you're doing and can't wait to keep learning from you.
All right. Thank you, Dave.